Good morning, everybody. Thanks for stopping on by. Hope you have your cup of Jonah for this morning. So, as you all remember, today is the final third of the reading on examining whether or not God exists, on seat. And then on Monday, we'll start to go into some more of the, in what ways does God exist? What things can we say about this thing that we call God? And you'll see a couple times in today's reading, kind of as we reach the climax of this chapter on the existence of God, we'll see, and he says, okay, well, he'll end a paragraph or an argument with, this we call God. So you'll see the claim is very limited here. Obviously, culturally, because of various religions and whatnot, we have, for a lot of us, the word God is very pregnant with meaning and religion. So I just remind you that this is a philosophical consideration, and we're pointing to whatever the highest, most noble, most perfect being is. In this case, much of the conversation to this point has been centered on movement, right? The first unmoved mover. That thing, whatever that is we're going to call God, right? So very interesting. Morning, Ted. So keep that in mind, that obviously we sometimes there's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction when we talk about God, if you're not there in terms of religion. Remember, this is a rational conclusion of, and we're naming God as the name that we're choosing. It's conventionally the most widely used name for that supreme being that is the cause of all things, the mover that started everything, the unmoved mover. So remember that. Second side note, which we'll circle back towards the end of yesterday, we talked a little bit about some more technical philosophical concepts like accident. And it occurred to me yesterday evening when reflecting on this after work, I was thinking about a good way to describe it, to kind of clarify a little bit. Substance and accident kind of go together. Substance is the thing itself, what makes a thing to be what it is, and accident are like characteristics that are peripheral to that being, right? That substance. A way to remember it is the etymology of the word substance, literally stance, standing, sub is under. So it's standing under these features and accidents and other qualities that you can basically rest on top of. So these accidents, quote unquote, are things that aren't the thing itself, but they're qualities or properties of the thing that rest upon it, right? In a sense. So Jonah is bearded. Jonah is white. Jonah is the examples that Aristotle used yesterday, Thomas used yesterday, was whiteness and musical. So Jonah is musical. Jonah is white. Jonah is bearded. Jonah is wearing flannel, right? So those things aren't essential to who Jonah is, but they are things that exist in Jonah, and are qualities or properties of Jonah. They rest on that which stands under them, the substance of Jonah, which supports them and gives them being in a way. So just wanted to throw that nugget out there for your reflection, because we will see those terms come up again and again as we talk about different things throughout these philosophical considerations. Okay, so without further ado, he had just kind of started examining, and he had just finished thinking about and talking about motion of a thing in part or in whole, and different kinds of motion. And here we continue. But there is another point to consider. Among self-moved beings known to us, namely animals, although the moving part, which is to say the soul, is unmoved through itself, yet it is moved by accident. Now, this is an accident meaning out of intention, or something outside of itself. So it's a different sense of the word accident than I just described. That is why Aristotle further shows that the moving part of the first self-moving being is not moved either by itself or by accident. For since self-moving beings known to us, namely animals, are corruptible, the moving part in them is moved by accident. But corruptible, self-moving beings must be reduced to some first self-moving being that is everlasting. Therefore, some self-moving being must have a mover that is moved neither through itself nor by accident. It is further evident that, according to the position of Aristotle, some self-moved being must be everlasting. For if, as Aristotle supposes, motion is everlasting, the generation of self-moving beings, this means beings that are generable and corruptible, must be endless. But the cause of this endlessness cannot be one of the self-moving beings, since it does not always exist. Nor can the cause of all self-moving beings together, both because they would be infinite and because they would not be simultaneous. There must therefore be some endlessly self-moving being causing the endlessness of generation among these sublunary self-movers. Thus, the mover of the self-moving being is not moved, either through itself or by accident. Again, we see that among beings that move themselves, some initiate a new motion as a result of some motion. This new motion is other than the motion by which the animal moves itself. For example, digested food or altered air. By such a motion, the self-moving mover is moved by accident. From this we may infer that no self-moved being is moved everlastingly, whose mover is moved either by itself or by accident. But the first self-mover is everlastingly in motion. Otherwise, motion could not be everlasting, since every other motion is caused by the motion of the self-moving first mover. The first self-moved being, therefore, is moved by a mover who is himself moved neither through himself nor by accident. Nor is it against the argument that the movers of the lower spheres produce an everlasting motion, and yet are said to be moved by accident. For they are said to be moved by accident not on their own accord, but on account of their movable subjects, which follow the motion of the higher sphere. Now, God is not part of any self-moving mover. In his Metaphysics, therefore, Aristotle goes on from the mover who is a part of the self-moved mover to seek another mover, God, who is absolutely separate. For since everything moving itself is moved through appetite, the mover who is part of the self-moving being moves because of the appetite of some appetible object. This object is higher in the order of motion than the mover desiring it, for the one desiring is in a manner a moved mover, whereas an appetible object is an absolute unmoved mover. There must therefore be an absolutely unmoved separate first mover. This is God. So there's more after this, but I'm just to pause to clarify a little bit what he's talking about with the appetite. Well, so first he was talking about the movement of animals and our soul, which is the thing that moves our body as animals. This applies to us as well. I move my feet, which moves my soul. But my soul is the one technically moving me through the movement of my limbs. But so my soul is indirectly moved because I'm moving the body that it controls, so to speak, that it's moving. But then he moves to appetites. This is interesting. So if we see a good, we move towards it with our will. We're drawn to it by our will, right? So our intellect perceives something. It's perceived, it's understood to be good, and therefore our will is drawn to it. On a lower order, we could say something like, a dessert seems good, or a glass of wine seems good, and so we're drawn to it. So whatever draws us, whatever good we perceive that draws us, is in some way moving us. It's drawing us to it. So he said there must be some, so given that thing has to be separate from us and is in some way moving us, right? So that's the argument. And he said, so therefore, everything that's moved is drawn by something outside of itself, and that can't go to infinity. And so he said that whatever that highest good is that draws all things, that's the cause of all movement, but itself is unmoved, is drawing us all, right? And so it has to be separate from everything that's moving. Morning, Snoop. Early morning madness, exactly, sir. All right, two considerations seem to invalidate these arguments. The first consideration is that as arguments, they presuppose the eternity of motion, which Catholics consider to be false. To this consideration, the reply is as follows. The most efficacious way to prove that God exists is on the supposition that the world is eternal. Granted, this supposition that God exists is less manifest. For if the world and motion have a first beginning, some cause must clearly be posited to account for its origin. For this origin of the world and of motion, that which comes to be anew must take its origin from some innovating cause. Since nothing brings itself from potency to act or from non-being to being. Remember, we talked earlier about something can't give what it doesn't have. So if it doesn't have motion, it can't give it. If it doesn't have being, it can't give it. If it doesn't have act, it can't bring potency, the ability to move or the ability to be. It can't bring that potency into act because you can't give what you don't have. Okay. The second consideration is that the demonstrations given above presuppose that the first moved being, namely a heavenly body, is self-moved. This means that it is animated, which many do not admit. Another fun side note here is that the ancients saw the stars in the sky and the celestial bodies, the wandering stars, as they called them. They considered them to be immutable and eternal, and their motion to be continuous and eternal and unchanging, which we see, frankly. We see that unchanging motion, but they did not see them as burning balls of gas millions of light years away. They did not. The reply to this consideration is that if the prime mover is not held to be self-moved, then it must be moved immediately by something absolutely unmoved. Hence, even Aristotle himself proposed this conclusion as a disjunction. It is necessary either to arrive immediately at an unmoved, separated first mover, or to arrive at a self-moved mover from whom, in turn, an unmoved, separate first mover is reached. So either way, Aristotle says, however you want to interpret the stars or these eternal moving celestial bodies, either way you consider it, it necessitates a separate unmoved mover. In Metaphysics, the second book of Metaphysics, Aristotle also uses another argument to show that there is no infinite regress in efficient causes, and that we must reach one first cause, God. This way is as follows. In all ordered efficient causes, so efficient causes is that which efficient meaning literally acting or bringing to effect. So an efficient cause is that which makes something to be or happen. In all ordered efficient causes, the first is the cause of the intermediate cause, whether one or many, and this is the cause of the last cause. But when you suppress a cause, you suppress its effect. Therefore, if you suppress the first cause, an intermediate cause cannot be a cause. Now, if there were an infinite regress among efficient causes, no cause would be the first. Therefore, all other causes which are intermediate would be suppressed. But this is manifestly false. We must therefore posit that there exists a first efficient cause, and this we call God. So in other words, he says, if you have a string of things causing each other, causing the next, causing the next, causing the next, causing the next, until what it causes, the movement of the coffee from my cup to my mouth, right? That last effect there of me taking the coffee, that's it. It's done. So that's the last cause, the last in a line of efficient causes. But before that, there was the movement of the cup. There was the movement of my hand. There was the movement of my arm moving my hand. There was the movement of my body moving my arm. The neurons firing, my intention, my choice, right? So all of these different efficient causes that trace back to something. In this case, me. Now, if I didn't exist, if I didn't make this choice, okay, then the coffee never would have, all of the intermediate causes before the effect of that coffee being inside of me, being consumed, right? If that first intention, so to speak, that triggered that chain of causes didn't exist, then none of the subsequent causes would take effect, right? So that's on a micro scale. On a macro scale, in the world, in the universe, and everything around us, there has to have been a first cause that triggered the chain reaction to everything we see today. Otherwise, if that first cause didn't exist, then none of it would exist. None of the effects would have rippled forward. Kind of like the stone hitting the pool and the ripples proceeding forth. But then if every single cause was an intermediate cause, this is the argument of Aristotle, meaning if everything was a chain reaction of causes, then everything would be an intermediate and there would be no first. So where would the origin be? It doesn't make sense, right? Okay. Another argument may also be gathered from the words of Aristotle. In Metaphysics, the second book, he shows that what is most true is also most being. But in Metaphysics 4, he shows the existence of something supremely true from the observed fact that of two false things, one is more false than the other, which means that one is more true than the other. This comparison is based on the nearness to that which is absolute and supremely true. From these Aristotelian texts, we may further infer that there is something that is supremely being, and this we call God. So in other words, it's interesting because you guys may have noticed in my X profile, there's that old scholastic adage that I love so much: seldom affirm, never deny, always distinguish. And this touches on that actually, because if everything, thank you for the repost, Ed Game. The closer we get to the font of truth. So if there are two false things, one is more false than another. That's another wonderful scholastic principle, is that where there's distinction, there's hierarchy. So where there's two things that are not the same, one is better than the other. So if there are two false things, then one must be more false or less true than the other, and the other must be less false and more true. In other words, in everything there's a commingling. In everything that we witness and experience, there's a commingling of truth and falsity. And so therefore there must be something that's supremely true, because as you get closer and closer to that, it becomes more and more true, less and less admixed with error. That being the case, and that truth is just being considered by the intellect, right? So that's something that Aristotle covers in the Book of Metaphysics, where being and true are somewhat interchangeable. So whatever that supreme truth is, or whatever that supreme being is, that's what we call God. That's his argument, basically. Damascene proposes another argument for the same conclusion taken from the government of this world. Averroes likewise hints at it. The argument runs thus: contrary and discordant things cannot, always or for the most part, be parts of one order except under someone's government, which enables all and each tend to a finite end. To a definite end, excuse me. But in the world, we find that things of diverse natures come together under one order. And this not rarely or by chance, but always and for the most part. Therefore, there must be some being by whose providence the world is governed. And this we call God. So there you have it. The conclusion of chapter 13. So you can see he spent the most time on talking about movement and mover and unmoved mover and things. So that was the first way. Then he talked about causes. You can't really have an infinite regress of causes. You can't have an infinite series of causes because there would never be a first cause. So whatever that first cause is that caused the chain reaction we see, we call God. Then he said, well, also, Snoop, I just had a movement. Another proof that God exists, Snoop. Excellent. So then he goes from the argument of that series of causes to saying, okay, well, there's also series of beings. There's something that's more being, and there's also something that's more true. And those are ways that we can tell also that there must be a first truth, a most true thing, a thing that is most existent. And then the last one was it's a beautiful thing, actually, because, today in our world, we see there's this confusion or this lie, one could call it a diabolical lie of evolution, which tries to posit that the Big Bang and then subsequently, there's this first cell of life that came from the primordial soup and then developed to what we have today. So their whole thesis is one of a disordered chaos that has produced the excellence that we see today. But we see such order. We see such precision in the balance of ecosystems, even in the phenomena of, take one simple thing like the human eye, which is far from simple. I saw an article the other day about AI taking, I don't know how many billions of parameters and how many kilowatt hours of power that go into every AI calculation, whereas the human brain runs more efficiently. It's like on 12 amps, something like that. So the efficiency and the technology, quote unquote, of our minds and what our minds are capable of far surpasses in efficiency and ability the most advanced AIs in the world. And that perfection that we see and the well-ordered things that we see all around us in nature, take the heavens as another example. These celestial bodies that move so perfectly in sync with each other, and this beautifully complex cycle that repeats again and again and again, to the point where we can predict, and even the Mayans predicted thousands of years in advance, exactly where every celestial body would be at a given time. What he's saying, quoting Averroes and Damascene, so those are ancient philosophers. Averroes is one of the Eastern philosophers of the time. There was at the time, there were a number of very prominent, very well known at the time of Aristotle, and thereafter there was a beautiful philosophical tradition in the East that rivaled that of the West. But anyways, so these arguments are this final argument is basically, look at this order that we see. There must be an intelligence, a providence that's something out there, up there, that governs everything and moves it and maintains it in perfect order. And that thing, whatever it is, we'll talk more about it, but that thing, whatever it is, we're going to call God. So again, a very limited claim, but still very important to recognize that the orderer, so to speak, the governor of the creator and the maintainer of the beautiful order that we see, that we call God. One of the few laws in science today are the laws of thermodynamics. Gravity's a theory, black matter's a theory. There's so many different theories out there that they say, oh, it's the best we can gather for now. Well, I disagree, but that aside, laws of thermodynamics are laws. That has an authority to it and a provability to it. One of the laws of thermodynamics is the law of entropy. Everything tends toward disorder. So if after thousands of years of recorded human history, we see a maintenance of and a continuation of this incredible, humbling, beautiful to behold order all around us, something's maintaining that order. Necessarily. Otherwise, entropy would have taken over a long time ago, and we wouldn't see the order we see today. So whatever that being is that is maintaining this beautiful order that we see, that we're going to call God. It's beautiful, huh? So it can't be some AI overlord. It has to be some supreme being that has maintained this order for so long. Now, Monday, after a brief reprieve this weekend, we will, chapter 14 is on that, the title is that to know God, we must use the way of remotion. That is a cutting away in the terminology that we use. We have to recognize that the terms we're applying to God are imperfect. There's a lot of imperfect things admixed into the terms we use, because by being, all we know is created being, imperfect being, mortal beings. So we have to cut away the idea of mortality, remotion. That's what that word means. And so we'll get into that on Monday. I don't want to get ahead of myself, or ahead of Thomas, I should say. Yes, Cram, it is an interesting way to put it. I agree. It's a beautiful, especially in our day and age. Okay. One could posit that we live in a simulation where everything's an illusion. Is it though? Is it? And I think that's, as we continue to plod through this, we're going to see that that's not, depends on what you mean by simulation. There's some sense in which that could be true, I guess, in the sense that we were just talking about with remotion. You have to take away imperfections of created beings. So is everything kind of an illusory, less real version of the supremely real God who governs all things? Okay, yeah, I guess in that sense. But in the sense of it being like a matrix simulation, it gets harder and harder the more you think through some of these concepts. It gets harder and harder to confidently say that, because everything seems to go against that kind of a notion. But again, also this idea of, especially now as AI gets more and more powerful, and AI can start to simulate reality more and more, simulate an intellect. It can simulate perhaps a 3D world through metaverse or whatever that can trick the brain into thinking God knows what, right? Those things you can start to see through and not be deceived by some of those subtle and confusing things by reflections like this, where you look at, okay, prescinding from my personal experience, we have to understand certain things, like about the train of causes, the succession of beings, the that movement that's perfect and seemingly eternal. Good morning, Meyer. Thanks for reposting. I love God too. Yep, I love it. I love these kinds of reflections, and I so appreciate all of you guys being here with me for this, because it's such food for the soul and the mind and the heart. But I love that last point that he pulls from Damascene and Averroes, that when we see that entropy doesn't take effect here, he doesn't use those words, obviously. Entropy wasn't the law of entropy. They hadn't defined as such. They talk about it, obviously, in different ways. But since everything tends to disorder, what's keeping the order here? What is it? So it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So happy Friday the 6th. Absolutely. Can't believe it's Friday already. My goodness. The time just flies. So, all right. Well, I think that's all for today, unless you have any other questions, folks. But I'm looking forward to Monday. We won't start the Saturday readings yet, but just to plant a seed, think about it. If you guys want to, if you guys would be interested in doing maybe a little bit more of an extended reading on Saturday of a different book, I would love that. Could potentially be a really nice thing as well. Kind of dabble into some other works, maybe from Augustine, or that On Being in Essence, that pivotal work by Thomas. That was so fundamental and so perfectly resolved a 1,000-year-old, a 1,000-year disagreement between Eastern and Western philosophers. So really beautiful stuff. Can I read Everyone Poops? I don't know that work, Snoop. I don't know. Is that one of your books? Anyway, so I appreciate you all. Yeah, so we'll pick back up on Monday with this an examination of how we talk about God. So now that we've established that whatever this unmoved mover is, whatever this first cause is, whatever this being that surpasses all other beings, whatever this being that maintains order in all of things, whatever that is, we're going to call God. Okay, but now if we want to talk about God and say things about God, we have to be careful how we use words. And that's the thing that's what we're going to discuss on Monday, is how we can use words to describe God when he far surpasses anything that we have a word for. So it'll be a fun one. So without further ado, I wish you all a wonderful weekend, a restful weekend, and ponder entropy and order. Ponder this weekend how there's this beautiful order that subsists, that exists all around us. That's somebody's fault. I want to know who that is, and I want to know more about him. I appreciate you guys again for joining me for Cup of Jonah. Do not forget, if you like this, like and share. It always helps. But then also don't forget to subscribe to phoneboothpodcast.substack.com. Got a wonderful array of podcasts, ever more, it seems, week after week. But so many wonderful hours of content. Dad Game, be safe. You as well. Appreciate you being here. Cram, you as well. Cheers, gentlemen. Thank you, Meyer. God bless you. Have a great weekend, y'all. Take care.